Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Indigenous. Let's Talk Water, Season 3, Episode 4. And I'm Makasa Licking Horse, your host. Sego Sego Guego, Makashi Gets, Kaneka Haga Nugo Honjoda, Wakatahuni. Once again, hi, everybody. And so happy to see you. And I'm happy for you to join us and our wonderful guests that are coming up. Today's episode is about access to clean water. So in Indigenous communities across Canada, there has been a long struggle for clean water with little help from the government that hasn't made any real change. Today, we want to highlight the incredible work our people are doing with no budget and working infrastructure. Our water treatment plant operators and managers face many challenges, and we will explore some solutions for ongoing lack of access to clean water in Indigenous communities. And on the side note, we are also, this episode's a little bit different because we're now joined by a co-host tonight, and his name is Colin Gibson, who is a project officer on Indigenous, our water project here in the Six Nations. And he's been working on the project for almost 1.5 years, and he's a University of Guelph graduate student studying water in Indigenous communities and has been working with one of our guests. He'll be here to ask some questions to our guests. So, hi, Colin, if you wanted to say something.
Sure. Hey, Makasa, how's it going?
Good. Happy
Thank
to
you.
have you.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really honored to be joining you tonight to ask the amazing guests that are on the show some questions, and to tonight's episode is just related to what I'm studying so much, and I'm so excited and like I said, honored to be joining you. So I'm super excited. Hopefully the guests are excited, and yeah, I'm ready, just so ready to dive into it tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Colin. And yeah, Colin is a great person. He's been working on our project forever, and he suits the look, and he's super wise, like super.
Oh,
It's
stop.
like Gandalf.
Oh, it's the beard. It's the COVID beard, eh? I
Yeah,
thought you might mention something like that tonight.
yeah.
I
So
guess I just wanted to add a little background. My research specifically or my educational background is water resources engineering and international development. So the last year and a half that you've mentioned, being able to work on the Oneganos project is just been so eye-opening to me, and it's just been such a amazing process of learning. So thank you again for having me on, and this is just such another opportunity for an amazing opportunity to learn some more and to share experiences and knowledge with people that are working managing water and water systems in Indigenous communities, and there's just so much to learn. So thanks again.
yeah,
I'm so
no
excited.
problem. Yeah, he's been working with our schools, and he got chased by dogs. He's had like the full resident experience. So he's well trained with working Indigenous communities. So yeah, so before we meet our guests, we're going to start with a song and a show by Frank Wallen called Wikiksuyaye, which means remembrance, and it's about remembering who you are and where you come from. Let's take a look.
Well, really, family is the most important thing. And I always say, you don't have to have money and fancy things to be happy and have a good home.
raised on the res. Say a prayer for my family sitting in the feds. I'm made on the res, music's played on the res. Fought suicide, my life was saved on the res. I started on the res, starving artist on the res. And then I left for school and I was hardly on the res. It's hard being gone, but it's harder on the res. Sometimes I act heartless cause my heart is on the res. My mama on the res, and she can't find a job. My grandma on the res, and every day she pray to God. Why God forgot about us? History's taught without us. They're living on our land, but ain't nobody thought about us. I'm writing songs about us because I miss my home. I tell the world about you and how you made me strong, how you gave me love, how you made me smart. You were my first love. You're always in my heart.
I really think this was the best place to raise a big family because they were out in the country and they learned a lot. Love is the most important thing, and it's got to be sincere. One thing I taught my kids was never to discriminate against nobody, to love everybody.
I'm reconnecting with my sister, healing wounds with my brother. Survived some dark things I talked through with my mother. I try to forgive my father, but some days it's harder. Me and my mama struggle, he wouldn't even bother. The struggle made me smile, I woke Sape Otehi. I had to learn to let go for Creator to bless me. Why people they stress me, my people they stress me. But until the day I die, like code is how you address me. I'll take you back to the res, take you back to the spot where the settlers are cold and the summers are hot and the cattle got sold. My mom almost got shot. Stories we never told, some we wish we forgot. Wanna kisu yapo, now we gotta remember. Like burying loved ones in the cold of the winter, or playing with your cousins under the summer sun. Hear the spirits of our ancestors like thunderous drums. Yeah.
Thank you for watching the show by Wakiksuye, Frank Wallen. And for tonight's show, we're going to start off by sharing a circle of 3 guests to talk to each other about water system in each of their communities. And we'll loop in recently retired professor from Mohawk College to conclude the episode. So our first guest, his name's Steve Lickers, and he's from Six Nations, and he's a water operator. Krista Derrickson is a manager of utilities and public works at Westbank First Nation. And Warren Brown is a manager of the operation and maintenance department, Lytton First Nation. Yeah, and yeah, each of our guests will be given a chance to answer each of the following questions. So I think Colin, you have something?
Yeah, I was just gonna add, just to add to kind of the format for today, because we have three guests from different First Nations communities, all involved in water operations. The first set of questions, we were going to try to just get to know each of our guests and their communities and their work a little bit. So we'll kind of ask each guest a question and give each guest an opportunity to answer the question. Then we'll kind of just open it up to broader, more open-ended questions and try to get some really rich discussion, and hopefully from our audience as well. Just thought I'd add a little bit to that so they understand the format.
Awesome. You're a great co-host. I was not to say that. I didn't say that part. But yeah, I guess we'll start off with our first question. And so that is, please tell us where you're from, a little bit about where you're from, your community, and the water in your community.
So maybe we could start off with Steve. Well, I guess Steve, you already introduced that he's from Six Nations as well, and when you've talked about Six Nations on the show, but maybe Steve, you can talk a little bit more, sharing your perspective and how long, given how long that you've been working in Six Nations, your perspective on waters and Six Nations.
Hello, everybody. I've been working with Six Nations for a little over 27 years now. We look after all of the water treatment and the distribution system. We draw our water from the Grand River. We're also looking after the wastewater side of things on Six Nations. So we look after the lagoon system, and we have a wastewater collection system within the village that consists of about 8 pumping stations. We're currently looking to expand on that and eventually build a wastewater treatment plant. That's kind of where our next goal is, and to expand the water lines throughout the reserve, which we're currently working on. That's kind of where we're at right now. We've been slowly expanding. We just built a new water treatment plant there about 7 years ago, roughly. It's taken a long time to get to that point. We started about 15, 16 years in working with the government to try and get the funding to build that plant, and eventually we did get it. So it's been designed to treat enough water to service the whole community in the long run. That's where our goal is.
Steve, could you talk a little bit about, you mentioned the Grand Rivers, the source water for the water treatment plant that was recently upgraded several years ago. Could you talk a little bit about it being a source water for a water treatment plant and how that might compare to some other municipalities like source water or the Grand River specifically, and its condition versus groundwater or other sources?
I think one of the things we've kind of noticed over the years is looking at some of the lake water, like the river's constantly moving, so we don't see as high a levels of certain contaminants that you would see in a lake where it may just sit in the bottom or sit in an area where it can be drawn into the plant. So, I mean, a lot of people look at the river and say, oh, it's brown, it's dirty, it's whatever, but you don't get really high numbers when it comes to certain contaminants. The downfall side is we pick up contaminants from everywhere. We get agricultural, industrial, commercial, basically everything all up and down the river ends up at some point in the river and flows through Six Nations. So that's one of the things that we found over the years. There's several wastewater plants upstream of us. We've got a lot of industrial type of buildings that are out there, like factories and whatnot, that are, I guess, ultimately putting some stuff into the river that maybe shouldn't be there. And a lot of it is all regulated by the government. And it's the hard part for us is we fall under the same regulations, but they regulate those people as well. Well, instead of making us be the ones that have to treat the water, we think they should do a little more on the regulation side of keeping it out of the water to begin with. So, I mean, that goes for not just drinking water, but for recreational use and all the different things that, you know, people use the river for, whether it be fishing or boating or whatever, they still have to deal with that stuff. So it's definitely a challenge. We're always looking at new and upcoming things that are coming down the line. We're seeing stuff with pharmaceuticals now that are coming out of wastewater plants, illicit drugs, different chemicals that haven't really been, I guess, really looked at in the past. Some of the stuff from a lot of the sprays going on the fields and whatnot for the planting and different chemicals they use. And then you got a lot of people that have cattle that get into the creeks and whatnot, and their GRCA's put out a few different occasions to try and get people to, like in the farm communities, to try and step back a little bit from having their cattle directly in the creeks and putting buffer zones up and whatnot. So there's a lot of opportunity out there for people to try and access funding to make their water in their areas better. And that all kind of ties into the source water protection that we have a source water protection plan like everybody else does. It includes GRCA. It also includes the Lake Erie Greater Lake Basin. So there's a lot of different things that go on long before we see the water at the water plant. That's different people have, you know, made attempts to make things better or make things worse in some cases, I guess. So it's definitely a challenge out there. Opposed to somebody who's on a well, they may have different, totally different conditions. You know, they'd be dealing with sulfur or hard water, or they could be dealing with sulfides. There's a number of different things that you see with the wells, and then you got goody wells, which are groundwater under the influence, wells that are getting groundwater into them. So they're almost like a surface water, because you got surface water getting into a well. So that's basically what they discovered in Walkerton. So everybody's got their own issues and their own problems, I guess. That's kind of where we start.
I know, Kosh, you've had some or several episodes with Charles and him talking, one of the Indigenous researchers, talking about environmental racism, and Steve, like you mentioned, some of the upstream contamination flowing down to the stretch of the Grand that runs through Six Nations.
It's no doubt in my mind that it's environmental racism. And that's just blatantly what it is. And because, like he's saying, we need more prevention, and we have no control at this point of what's happening upstream and what's going into the water in the first place, like all of these contaminants, and that needs to change, in my view, for our water to get more clean. And it's totally possible that our water can be clean down here, because it's cleaner upstream. And since I was on the 2-row paddle, I've seen with my own eyes, I could like vividly see that the water at the Grand River was much cleaner upstream, where before all of these contaminants and the sewage pipes go into the Grand River, it's much more cleaner upstream. And if it's upstream, then we can definitely get it clean downstream, and it's just taking steps and how that can change. But yeah,
I just had one more question for Steve. I know I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, because we got a bunch of questions for all of our guests. I'm just curious though, was groundwater ever looked at as a source for the water treatment plant instead of the grant?
We had looked at it. There was several studies done, I guess, over time. One of the things they looked at was what they consider stilling wells. So basically, you would drill wells close to the Grand and allow the water from the Grand River percolate through the soils to assist the well in volume, I guess would be the easy way to explain it. The type of soil material that we've got varies so much, and it just wasn't possible. And that kind of goes along the same too, as as you're up and down the river, you've got areas where you've got rock beds, you've got areas that's sand, there's areas that are clay. So there's just going through the river, you see the changes. Like if you go out by Paris, the water's nice and clean. There's a lot of rock out that way. The further up you go, it gets different types of murkiness from algae and stuff because the water doesn't flow as fast. So all up and down the Grand, it's all different areas, different types of water that's based on the riverbed itself. So that's there
So
was never we haven't really seen enough volume, I guess, in all the test wells they did to be able to support what we need for water for the entire reserve to just go with a well system. So.
And just out of curiosity, for volume, is it more like the aquifer or the quantity in the aquifer, or the soil, the soil structure, like that it's finer?
It's a little bit of both, I guess. The structure of the soil around Six Nations is primarily clay, so you don't get a lot of good filtrated water through the clay. It just doesn't tend to get there as fast as it should. So that's where you'd end up with multiple wells to try and get enough volume. There's been talk over the years of actually running a raw water pipeline from Lake Erie up to, I think they were looking at going towards Kitchener Way at one point, just to service some areas where they were on wells but not getting enough volume. And then areas that are having trouble with water quality in the raw water. And that talk's been going on for a number of years now, and I'm not sure where they stand with that, if that's something they're still going with. The problem was they wanted all of the municipalities along the way to put in X number of dollars to try and build this pipeline for raw water, but the municipalities in the meantime have already started to upgrade their plants and stuff to deal with the water that they've got. So a lot of them opted out at the time, and I think that kind of slowed that project down. So there's always options out there, like different options. We chose to go with the surface water just because of the volumes we've had. We've looked at the history of the flows, and basically like the city of Brantford, they use less than 1% of the flow at any given time. So we would be even probably a smaller amount than that of the actual volume. So looking at the water treatment plants and stuff is taking too much water wouldn't be an issue that way. It's more the agricultural golf courses and stuff like that are watering huge volumes of landmass to try and keep the grass green that uses the big volumes of water. So we're not impacting the river, I guess, as much as a lot of other places are, or other people.
Yeah, and we have a question. What contamination concerns you the most after monitoring water all of these years? What's the biggest changes?
I guess the biggest thing we find is looking at some of the different chemicals coming down from over the years. We would see different chemicals that were unknown, that we didn't have a number. NDMA was a big thing way back in the early 90s there. The original, our old treatment plant was shut down for 51 weeks until they could figure out what this chemical was and how to get rid of it and how to treat it. And eventually they found it was coming from a Unaroyal plant out by Cambridge, from a closed plant that had high volumes of NDMA that was in the groundwater and slowly leaping into the river. So we've seen that improve over the years, but every now and again you still pick up little pieces of, if they're out there spraying fields, you'll get in the raw water, you'll see some kind of contaminant come in, a pesticide or whatever it happens to be. Roundup was another one that was a big thing that they just slowly started to get rid of now. So you had golf courses and everybody just spraying Roundup so they didn't have to cut the grass, but it ended up in the river. We read it in the raw water, but we were, fortunate enough to take it out. And that's what that's one of the reasons why we ended up with such a plant with all of the equipment that we have, is because we wanted to make sure that we could always be ahead in that game and know we can take care of stuff before it even becomes a regulation, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, has any of our other guests have anything to build on what anything that Steve has said?
I think I think maybe we can just ask our next guest or our other two guests a similar type of question, especially because Makasa, as you living in Six Nations, and I've been working with Six Nations for a little while, and talking with Steve, we're both a little bit more familiar with the Six Nations situation, but our other two guests out in BC, just really interested to hear about the systems and about the waters over there. So, Krista, do you want to tell us a little bit about where you're from, your community, and the water in your community?
Sure. So I'm from Westbank First Nation. We're about 3.5 hours inland from Vancouver. So we're in the interior of British Columbia. We take our water out of the Okanagan Lake. I think that there is 48 different intakes throughout the Okanagan Lake. It's a very long, kind of winding lake. We have deep water intakes. So our takes are far enough out and deep enough down when we experience lake turnover, which is in the change in water temperature, we actually are below that level. So it's very rare that our water ever changes or is affected by any kind of outside source. In 2017, was the first time that we were ever drastically affected by turbidity, because it's normally something that doesn't happen for us. But in 2017, we had major flooding. We had parts of mountains that ended up in the lake. The lake looked like chocolate milk, which is never what happens at our lake. So our system normally runs like turbidity levels. We normally see like a 0.13. When we hit our highest peak in 2017, we were at 58 NTU. So it was just like nobody's treatment plant was working. And it was actually fortunate for us that all we currently do with our treatment is chlorinate our water, because our water quality is so clean. We'd have to add too many chemicals in order to take anything out. So for us, when we went through that flood, we were able to get back online quicker than anybody else, because there's a lot of the treatment plants almost had to completely shut down, had to rebuild everything and then start up again. So we work with the municipality around us, which is the city of West Kelowna, and we actually supplied them with water for a bit because they almost lost their treatment plant into the river. So it was very interesting. It was an interesting year for all of us, but we've been really fortunate. We're in a good location within the lake as far as the water flows through the lake. We actually have, I think we spent about 4 years back in 89 when we were first developing our intakes. And we worked with a bunch of scientists and a bunch of water quality technicians. And we actually mapped the flow of the lake before we decided the location for our intakes. So we've been very fortunate compared to most.
I was gonna ask how old that deep water intake was, and you said 89 was when it was.
So 89 is when we started the research. We officially started operation of our intake in 96. Sorry, 93, our first one. Then we have two separate systems because we have municipality in between us, and our newest intake was installed in 2000. So as far as water systems go, we have a pretty baby system compared to most, because our first real development happened in 65.
And is Westbank a large First Nations community?
Compared to most, no. Yes and no. So we're not very large in land mass, and we've got just over 900 members, but we only have about 200 that live on the reserve. What we do have is, because of our location, we have, I think, close to 10,000 non-member residents. So our system is paid for by ratepayers, which is mostly non-members. And so that's how we've been able to grow and get so big so quick, because of the development that's on our reserve. And so we operate more like a municipality than most First Nations water systems, because we kind of have to, because we have ratepayers. So we follow different rules, but it also puts us in a really unique position where we're able to charge for upgrades to the people that actually use it. And when developers come in, they have development cost charges. We collect land tax at Westbank as well. So we're able to create our own money. Our newest intake that I had mentioned earlier, which is our IR10 system, the entire pump house and the upgrades were actually bought and paid for, all with using our own source revenues. So when we signed our self-government agreement, it was just right before, like just after our pump house had opened. So we did a tour for a bunch of delegates from Ottawa, and one of the delegates told us, "Oh, look at what our money bought us." And we were like, "Actually, there wasn't a penny of our money that went into this. So this is what we were able to do on our own." Felt pretty good.
Wow. Yeah. I bet for sure. And it's, I know we were talking about this earlier, kind of in our prep show, but just about the differences between the communities and the water systems, between you and Steve and Warren. So I think that might be a good segue, just to see if Warren wanted to talk a little bit about the different systems. And I guess I can't remember, did you mention, Krista, like that the water treatment plant services, there's not many wells in the community, right? It services primarily.
We actually have 0 wells in our community.
Oh, okay.
So we originally were off of, I think we had 28 wells originally before we created our water system, and now we have nobody that's on a well. The only area that's still operated by a well is actually our golf course, and it's because they don't want to use treated water, and they don't want to affect their grass with treated water, and they also don't want to pay for treated water. So they have their own private well that they use for irrigation purposes only, because it doesn't meet drinking water standards.
Wow. Yeah. Quite different. And even, I guess, from in the case of Six Nations, Kosh, you've talked a little bit about, and Steve alluded to earlier about the situation on Six Nations is quite different for people living on wells. And Steve can maybe correct me on the number, but I think it's about 10% or so are the number of people that are connected to the treatment plant. So Totally different situation than Westbank for sure. Was I in the ballpark there, Steve? And
Yeah, that's where we're at. We're only servicing a small part of the reserve, primarily because the water mains didn't go there. But the argument with the government is that, you know, they got level of service standards, what they consider how many houses are on X number of frontage, I guess, of the road. So if you only got 5 houses on a road, they don't want to fund putting water main in. So you got to try and find that money yourself, or try and find a way to get the water to an important area, and then along the way you can service some of the other people. And that's, you know, it's tough. It's always a funding thing. It always comes down to the money, no matter which way you go. I was just listening there about the turbidities. Like when springtime, we see turbidities coming in, or anywhere from, like today, we're probably around 15 to 20 NTU, and we'll see 13 or 1400 in the springtime when the freshet comes down. So it just goes to show that from one plant to the next, how much different technology you need to treat that type of water. It makes a big difference in the area you're at, and the quality of the raw water that you got to work with. So
yeah, I agree, and thank you. But Warren, did you want to say a little bit about where you're from and the community and the water and the health of the water there?
Sure. Hello. So my name is Warren Brown. I'm the manager for the Lytton First Nation O&M department. I've been with them since 2002, and I've also been a certified operator since October of 2002. So I got certified in the same year that I got hired. It was one of the things I had to do when I got hired. Living in Lytton pretty much all my life. Lytton's in the Fraser Canyon, maybe 3 to 4 hours north of Vancouver, driving. Nice scenic drive, of course. Lytton's got a small population of about 2,500 people. That's including the village of Lytton and the 4 surrounding reserves. So we're including everybody into to Lytton. So we're about 2,500 people. Warm summers, lots of rafting, camping, hiking, all the fun stuff. Little description on our systems. I got a variety of systems. So I have 4 surface water systems and 3 well systems, and none of them are from a main river. So everything we have is from tributaries into the Fraser River. So we don't have any pre-treatment or any pharmaceuticals coming down the river that we have to clean out. So we're lucky in that part.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, did you have something else?
No, I'm just waiting for a prompt.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds awesome, and that seems a lot. Like, what is the difference between monitoring water from like a smaller population? Because I think that we have a bigger population here in Six Nations. I don't even know what our population is exactly. Like, do you have an idea? Any idea, Steve?
I think we're probably up around 12 to 15,000, somewhere in there. That's on reserve. I think there's over 20,000 band members in total, with the urban Indians, I guess, that live off the reserve.
Yeah, so it's like a huge. Yeah, no, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, we have about 1,000 members living on our reserves, but Lytton is so spread out, and Lytton First Nation has a total of 7 different water systems. And out of those 7 water systems, we service 11 different reserves altogether. So our systems are all spread out throughout the Fraser River area, mainly.
Wow. Quite different systems. Oh, I'm sorry, Krista.
That's okay. And it's kind of funny because I think that I have the fewest amount of members, but in BC, I have one of the largest distribution systems for First Nation owned and operated system. So it's interesting because we're little, but we've got a lot of area that we cover and a lot of connections that we have.
Yeah. I can't imagine like what how different the structures are in the different areas. Yeah, and Colin, did you want to ask the next question?
Yeah, for sure. I think we learned quite a
Oh,
bit. Oh, I'm sorry.
sorry.
Go
Sorry.
ahead, Kosh.
I know that we have a question, one of our questions from our audience. And this one is to Steve regarding our Grand River and the fish in it. So it says, I have heard several species of fish have made a comeback in the Grand River since the 80s. Is this true?
I think GRCA has been making a lot of improvements to the river. Like I was saying, they were giving out fundings for farms to put out buffer zones and things like that. They've looked at cleaning up a lot of areas. I know out in Dunnville, they've done a massive cleanup out that way. There's definitely a lot of the fish species are coming back that weren't surviving that well, I guess, for a number of years there. The river is really slowly getting cleaner as time goes on with regards to a lot of the different stuff that they've done in the environment around, and source water protection has really bumped that up, I think, is because when they started with the source water protection, it wasn't just us, it's, you know, every municipality up and down the river has it. So it made people aware of what was really going into the river, and, you know, a lot of the people had the ability to prevent that or stop it, and the fish have really recovered over the years. I know a lot of the brown trout, they got sections where there's a lot of brown trout. They've got brook trout, all different types of species that they haven't seen there for years and years. I know apparently at one point there was even sturgeon in the river there, so we're kind of waiting to see if that even comes back one day. And then I guess the fish ladders and stuff they put in from up by the lakes and that, they've repaired some of them, and they've looked at taking out some of the dams and whatnot to improve all of that as far as the environmental part of it goes. So yeah, I would say there's been quite a few species that have recovered quite nicely there.
Yeah, how beautiful would it be if the sturgeon came back? Like, those are huge fish. And I know that my friend, his grandfather has a photo of him carrying a sturgeon on his back, and it's from his head all the way down to his toes, him in our Grand River, and that's insane to think about, to me anyways. And yeah, we have a question for Krista and then Warren. So Krista, what are some challenges you face working in a male dominant sector?
Well, I've actually been really fortunate. So I grew up, I guess it's just the way that I was raised. I kind of grew up as a tomboy. I've always had, the majority of my friends have always been the boys, and growing up on the reserve, there wasn't a lot of girls in my age group. So most of my friends were boys. So to come into this industry kind of made sense. At the very beginning, I had my first boss at Westbank when I came into the utilities also happened to be my cousin, which helped. And so he had been our operator for about 10 years when I first started. And I only ever had one instance where somebody kind of questioned my ability because I was a girl. And my cousin immediately said, I'll put her up against any boy on your team. She'll outwork you all. So it just kind of came, I just kind of always had a level of respect because I've always kind of earned it. So I know that not everybody has had that same experience. I know some other women that are in the industry that have not been as lucky as I have been. But I think that it helps that I come from a First Nation community, that I'm surrounded by a lot of First Nations operators who kind of already have that automatic level of respect for women and women's roles when it comes to water. And so because I have so many people around me that respect and kind of trust me and my role, that it just kind of rolls out to others as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I bet you're a huge role model for any of the other First Nations young girls who want to be a water operator.
I'll help
And
anybody if they want it.
yeah, so yeah, reach out to her if you would like to become a water operator. And yeah, I think you definitely help a lot of people. And yeah, for a question for Warren, what's your favorite part of your job? Question mark.
The favorite part of my job is meeting a whole bunch of new people, like meeting you all here on this monitor, which is totally different than what I'm used to, which is face to face. But meeting people like Krista in my travels and whatnot for different conferences and training sessions all over the place. I mean, I think most of my life I've traveled all over the place and met a whole bunch of new people, made a bunch of new friends all over the world, and it's been great. I mean, this job is no different. You get to talk to professionals in the industry, such as Krista, other operators from around the province of BC, and Ottawa and Ontario when I was over there visiting for a conference too. And yeah, it's just kind of like playing with Lego. It's a new toy every day. It's a new person every day almost. So
Mm-hmm.
I saw that that Lego reference in your bio too. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I
What did it say again? What did it say again?
Warren, in your bio, I think it said you Lego and BMX racing. Was it?
oh yeah, those are my hobbies.
Hobbies?
So I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a big
Well,
Star Wars.
yeah.
Hobbies, addictions, whatever.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah. I love
yeah,
Star Wars.
I
Sorry,
think
go
talking
ahead, Colin.
about I was just gonna say, I think talking, Warren, you talking about all the different people that you get to meet and just your role. Our next question is a little bit more personal about how you started working in your role. We wanted to highlight, you know, a lot of the stuff that happens behind the scenes when it comes to water. Ironically, people don't really know about all that much. You know, a lot of people just turn on the tap or get their water, you know, and they don't necessarily know where it comes from. But you know, water is so important. As gosh, you've had so many episodes just talking about all the different dimensions of water and how essential it is. Water is life. We wanted to know a little bit about how you started working in your role, and you know, the work that you're doing in your role specifically, just because the kind of miracle work that each of you do as water operators in your communities. I think it's really important for people to know. So maybe if we can start with Steve, I guess again. How did you start off in your role?
I actually, I started with the roads department initially. I was working seasonal work, and they had a placement program. I went there, and they give you X number of weeks or whatever of work to try something different, or through unemployment insurance at the time. Got involved with that, and then you kind of got in with public works and got to know, you know, all the things that was going on there, and you find some interest in it. I think you'll find, for the most part, a lot of the water operators, it was never really designed where something could go, you know, somebody could go to school and just say, well, I'm going to go and take water treatment and become a water treatment plant operator. That's why you find so many of them it's down through the families. It's, you know, aunt, uncle, cousin, whatever it happened to be, a father, and they brought somebody from their family into it because they actually see what goes on and know you know, a little bit about it and get interested in it that way. Like even recently, my son just started with us. He's been about 2 years now, starting from the bottom, working his way up. So, you know, it's always kind of been that way as far as people getting into the actual water treatment industry. It's always kind of somehow through family. I don't know. And then you look at the, you know, the family backgrounds of it too, because our communities are really tight knit, opposed to, say, a municipality where you know a lot of the people, you know everybody around, and so you want to make sure you got somebody at least looking after the water for them, to make sure they got clean water for their kids. And you know, my kids all went to school down here, and you know, your family, your friends and brothers and sisters and whatever, they're all using the water. So you kind of, it gives you a different sense. It's not really like, it's not the type of job where you just go and sign up for, and becomes a way of life really with the water treatment plant. You never really get away from it. You're always, you know, for us, where it's 24/7, there's always something going on out there that you got to attend to, or you know, whether it be a leak at somebody's house, or a problem at the plant, or a leak along the road, or you know, it just goes on and on. But yeah, it's always, typically it's family that gets in, and somebody they know, and they bring somebody along and try and get them interested in it. And in some respects, it's hard to find operators because it's been tough. We've had a lot of young fellows come through that were non-native operators that have come and got some training and left and went to bigger municipalities for more money or whatever it happens to be. And that's kind of a downside too, being on the First Nations. You don't, like, we don't have a tax base that we can draw from. So you're basically looked at by the government. Well, you're not paying income tax, so we can pay you a little less than somebody who's off the reserve working in the municipality. And that's, so when you get guys that want to be in the industry, if they're, you know, if they're non-native or they happen to want a little more money, that's where they go to the municipalities that have a tax base. So that's kind of where I started anyways, just on a program. And that's kind of what we're hoping to do with some of the young people coming along, get them in on programs, at least placements. We take students every year, let them see what we do, and you know, hope somebody gets interested along the way.
Krista, is it a similar type of personal story for you in the community and family, taking on the role as water operator and in this industry?
It was, but in a much different path. So I am the third generation of my family that has worked in our utilities department. So my grandpa, who passed away before I was ever born, he actually was one of the first members to try and help find a proper source water for the reserve. So he actually, what is now considered Shannon Lake, he was actually an equipment operator and helped kind of dig the lake that was supposed to be our reservoir for our community water system before we had the wells. But because the mountains that we're surrounded by Mount Bushray, which is an inactive volcano. So because of that, the ground is too porous to actually have that be our reservoir lake. So that failed, and then we stayed with the wells. My dad our house was the closest to the reservoir. So whenever the well would stop, we would be the first house that would run out of water. So he would go to the well and reset the pumps, and then they realized that he was doing that. So then they put a fence up to try and keep him out. And then they didn't put the gate up properly. So he just like lifted it and moved it and got in. And then they said, well, like after a few months of doing this, they said, well, clearly we can't keep you out. You keep breaking in to fix it. So why don't we just pay you to do this? So when I was little, we had a phone on the wall that we knew was specifically for the utilities. So if that phone rang, you knew at a very young age, if you answered it, you had to answer it. "Sue can shoot utilities. How can I help you?" So I kind of was, I think I was 9 the first time I answered that phone. And then I actually went into the environmental field. So I went to Winnipeg, I went to CEER, the Center of Indigenous Environmental Resources, and I was going to be, I was thinking of going down the role of environmental lawyer. When I came back to my community to be the environmental officer, that job was no longer available. So I actually ended up working at a bank as a bank teller for a little bit. Then I was the chief executive assistant, and then the opportunity came up to come into the utilities, which I thought would be good to get my environmental background working. And I've been here for 20 years. So it's been, it was a very weird link back to my family, but yeah, I've had two cousins that worked in the utility as well. And now I currently have three band members as well as myself who are operators for our community.
Wow, awesome. And that's not a lot, is it? A lot of people to run what you need to do. Is that you said that's yourself and one other person?
For me, we've actually got 5 operators and myself. So there's 6 certified operators that run our system, and we're currently looking for more. We've got 3 vacancies. So
Oh, yeah. So how much yeah, so sorry. Yeah, Warren, did you have anything to say to that?
I didn't. The job was basically an opportunity. An opening came up in the O&M department, which I applied for. Before that, I was a paramedic with the BC Ambulance Service for a number of years. I was doing first aid on drilling rigs, road construction, up north from up around the Checkland area. But I was always keeping an eye out for any type of full-time work that'll get me closer to home or at home if I could. But yeah, the position was open with the O&M department. Submitted my resume, had an interview, and I got the job. But at the same time, I was trying to figure out what to do with my future before this job came in. I applied to the Thompson Rivers University in Kamloops to start a Bachelor of Arts program. I was actually going to plan to work towards being a counselor, but I chose the O&M job because I had a small family to support at the time. Pretty much after I started, like I said earlier, that I was informed that I had to study the small water systems book and try and get my certification in that, which I did throughout the years. I had advanced myself up on my certification levels to where I am now. And I was also the primary water operator for Lytton First Nation. But that I kept that position for 14 years before moving into the vacant manager position, which I'm in now. Just a little bit on that. The manager position was vacant for like 6 months, I think. And at which time I asked my fellow workers in the department, how would they feel if I applied for the position myself? I mean, with them, it was unanimous because nobody wanted to deal with all the paperwork and deal with the politics part and talking with people and everything else. So yeah, they all said, oh, go for it. So yeah, then I became the new manager for O&M. So here I am now to this day, and still struggling to fully understand all the responsibilities and expectations of this department.
Yeah, it seems like a very hard job to do, and like without a lot of instruction of like what exactly you're supposed to do and like how things are supposed to work. And so with talking about that, what are your greatest challenges? And if you're able to get everything you need, what would that look like?
Greatest challenges, I believe, is just trying to keep the staff that I have, like with the budget that I have, and making sure I can try and keep the guys here and not let them get taken away from other businesses out there that are trying to steal our operators. I think that's the biggest thing, trying to keep our operators happy.
Yeah.
And whatnot. So,
and I think Krista, you mentioned having some vacancies as well, and Steve, you mentioned the same thing as well. Struggling to retain operators just because of some wage differences between on reserve and off reserve. And do you want to speak a little bit more about that and how difficult it has been to keep operators?
Well, and I think that there is, like, across the board in our industry, because it's not really well known, like most operators become operators kind of by chance. It's not something that people really know about. So most operators don't, it's hard to find new operators. So industry wide, including outside of First Nations communities, it's actually finding people that want to be interested in becoming an operator. And like Steve was saying, it's really hard to find good operators and to keep them. A lot of younger people that come into an operator position, sometimes they don't realize how much time and dedication it takes to actually be an operator, because it is a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week kind of job. And we have a saying, it's like, to be an operator, it's not a job, it's not a career, it is a lifestyle. So it takes the right kind of person to come into this, but once you find it, you can't imagine being anywhere else but in this industry. No matter how frustrating it is, no matter how much you wish it could be better, you couldn't be anywhere else. At least that's how I feel about it. I think that the other operators on the panel will agree too.
Yeah, I mean, myself, I know for a fact that I'm not going to make a massive fortune. I'm not going to buy a mansion or nothing with what I earn, but it's definitely a long-term job that I am enjoying. It's not going to be something that, let's say next year the government says, well, we don't need water operators, we're going to lay everybody off. I know I've got a forever position. I know I'm not going to make a fortune, but the biggest thing is that I get to provide safe drinking water for my community and my family and whatnot out there. So, you know, I do it for the love of my community mainly.
One thing I find so interesting about water operators in the industry is just how, I mean, like we talked about earlier, a lot of people don't understand what goes on behind the scenes in terms of treating water, or even Steve was talking about the steps, source water protection prior to treating water. I just find it so interesting that the general public is kind of hidden from something that's so important, and then they rely on amazing people such as yourself to shoulder such a heavy burden in terms of treating the water, when if the general public were better stewards of the environment, there I don't know if there wouldn't be as much weight on the shoulders. But in terms of, and Steve, we've talked about this a little bit, and you talked about it earlier about the sophistications that have been added to your treatment plant as new contaminants, emerging contaminants, pharmaceuticals get added to the grand. Technologies are just going to have to be continually upgraded, and operators are going to have to be more sophisticatedly trained. It's such a perpetual cycle that I only see adding more and more weight onto amazing people as such as yourself shoulders. Do you have any thoughts on if that's sustainable in the long run, and things that we can be doing to I guess alleviate some of this pressure on you and the folks in your industry?
I think from our standpoint is, you know, we get uh, the support from the community goes a long way. Like, you know, if we're out working 2 o'clock in the morning on a water main break or something like that, you know, you get people dropping off coffee or they bring sandwiches or whatever, you know, and the people appreciate that, you know, that you're out there. They know that you're you're doing it for them, like to keep the water safe and keep the water flowing. That goes a long way for us. Like I said, knowing it's your family and your friends and everybody that's using it, that makes up a big part of, you know, the lack of funding and the lack of money you get as an operator. I mean, you're looking at jobs that are, you know, guys are starting out at $20 an hour to do, you know, where you're looking after, you know, drinking water for people, like living, breathing people, right? Like you could get in a dump truck and make the same kind of money driving back and forth to where, you know, the gravel pit, or there's places on a reserve where we got a large cigarette industry there. So security guards, you get a lot of the young people, they want to just sit in the car and watch the smoke cut for $30 an hour. Why would I go to work and, you know, put in the time and the effort for that kind of thing? So you see that a lot. But like you say, when you get looking at it and you get looking at the people and everybody who's out there looking back at you, you know, from your community and what you're trying to do from them, it's that's what really carries you, I think, a lot of times. You got to keep in mind too that, you know, we're not really governed by the province. We've been at this for years now. We don't have people coming in and saying, well, you're doing this right, you're doing this wrong. So you know, you carry that certain liability. You got to make sure that you're doing everything you can do and make sure that that water's safe. I mean, we're not regulated where, you know, to the point where the government says, oh, you're not treating the water well or whatever. So it's a whole different ballgame on and off the reserve. It's a lot different. But going with that too, like it's the same thing. It's all the people, you know, you see the people every day. You're out and about in the community and everybody knows you and knows what you're out there to do. And small knit community like that, you know, if you did something like you did in Walkerton, you wouldn't be around that community for long. It's just kind of goes without saying. It's, you know, it's a whole different world on and off the reserve. And it's sad really, because, you know, the funding should be the same. We should have the same access to safe drinking water as everybody else and not have the struggles and trials and tribulations that we jump through hoops, you know, year after year to get money to upgrade stuff or to do the things that should just be there. And like we do a lot of sole source income raising for ourselves. It's, you know, some reserves, they don't even charge for the water, they just supply it. You know, we bill for the water. We do water disconnections when people don't pay. It's, you know, we go through the same, basically is like a municipality, like some of the other operators are saying. You know, it's a lot different, but we do it on our own. We don't do it because the government's telling us to do it. We do it because we want to make sure it's done right. So that's where the difference is. It's not just a job to us. So kind of explains a little bit, I guess, about how the difference is on and off the reserve. It's like night and day, really.
Well, and it's one of those jobs that people don't really think about it until the water doesn't come out of the tap. Then it's like, hey, who do I call? Right? It's but everybody knows there's not a lot of thought that goes into it until you don't have water or until you have sewer backing up into your house. It's like people only recognize us when there's a problem. So I agree with you, Steve. Like when we have community members that throughout COVID, because we're an essential service, we had our elders came and drove by and held up signs and honked, and they did like a drive through the reserve thanking all of the essential services. Like that goes so far, because at least you know that people recognize the dedication. And so even though even though there are things that are wrong, the gratitude that we get from other people, just even by when we have anybody come up to us and say, you know, I've never thought about our water because I know that you guys are taking care of it. Like, that's one of the biggest compliments that you can get as an operator, is to know that people trust you. I think that the only thing that we need to do as an industry is to educate people that this is a career. It's not something that you just have to fall into anymore. And I think that the more people that become aware and become educated in water and how important it is, I think the more we'll be able to get some younger people in, because right now there's a huge cross section of operators that are getting ready to retire in the industry in general. And it's about trying to fill those positions before those vessels of knowledge leave, because there are some things that you will just never learn in a book. And we have one of my operators is getting ready to retire. He's been doing this for almost 40 years. And he has all of these random facts of knowledge that are like, why would you even think about that? And he's like, oh, well, because this happened this one time over here, and I saw this guy do that, and we just built something, right? And it's like that, but that's great. So it's also that it's trying to capture that knowledge before it leaves to a generation of new operators. And I think that educating people is the way to get more operators into our industry.
And I think we're on the same page, like as a project, because we actually created a program that we can train new operators, and they can get a certificate and be trained as a water operator, because we seen that there was a need for that, which there is. And it is, I just want to say thank you so much for being an essential service and all of the work that you do and the countless hours that you might not even have been paid for. And so you're right up there, like with the nurses and doctors, and you should be appreciated as such. And I wish that you did get the same payment as a doctor, because it's basically as you're basically getting trained as just as long as being an operator, and you are essential service. If we look at how important our water is, to us, and the life that like it has, and that we cannot live without water, period. And that's just the fact. And maybe we just need to open our eyes up a little bit more of how important water is. And that's what this show is about. We talk about water in all aspects relating to health and mental health and wellness, and all different kinds of stories. And we have 3 seasons of it, like 20 episodes talking about water. So yeah, it's definitely important that we take care of our water and take care of the people who are looking after the water, such as you guys yourselves. And so we have I totally agree. Chelsea just commented. She said, give them more money. And we had commenters saying they agree with Steve. And we have one more question. Another question that says, Yama, for all the work that each of you do, and you're right up there with the doctors and nurses to essential health and well-being, but you're doing it alone with little support, and that needs to change. What can we do to help?
Well, I think that just acknowledging operators whenever you have an opportunity to, it's put up a sign like, we love operators, right? We actually have bumper stickers, and I've got some coasters and shirts that are like, no operator, no water, no operator, no water, no operator, no beer, no operator, no wine, no operator, no coffee. Right?
Oh yeah.
So we try to do those things. We've got our certification board in BC. We have we've got these shirts that got made that we could buy that are like the front says I'm a wastewater operator, and on the back it says, I know my, and then it's got the poop emoji, right? So it's, just acknowledging operators in general is something that can go a long way.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
sorry.
I'm just saying I made a post about how we should appreciate more our water operators here in Six Nations and in other communities, because I agree with you. Colin, did you have something?
I just wanted to say, there's been so much talk about funding. Steve talked about expanding the water line so more people can have access, and it's can be a political issue in terms of who we vote for at the federal level to pressure political leaders at that level to care more about the issue and allocate more funding of the federal budget towards Indigenous Services Canada, so that wage increases can occur, so that water mains can be expanded. Just thinking about that as well in terms of providing a collective push to continue to mainstream the issue, because it was a part of Trudeau's platform. Boil water advisories, and there's still lots of boil water advisories, in Indigenous communities across Canada. So I just thought I'd maybe throw that in there because funding obviously is important for operator retention and system infrastructure.
Well, just on the funding part, I know with our department, we have a set budget every year, and I know we're pretty well stretching the budget from our department having one extra person on there that we can barely afford. So in order to try and keep my staff as it is, I've foregone the last two raise opportunities for myself, and I've instructed my administration if they can just give it to my water operators or separate my wage amongst my staff, because really it's those guys that are doing all the work. I'm the one just sitting in the office writing letters and talking to people and having meetings. But I even told the staff that I don't want my raises. I don't need my whatever percentage they were going to offer. I offered it to them because they're the ones doing all the hard work. So to say, I haven't really had a raise in the last couple of years.
Yeah,
which is fine.
we're just so everybody knows, we're extremely underfunded with the water treatment plant, but also the water waste treatment, and yeah, that's just what they're attesting to. And a comment says should be a top federal priority, not just to build water treatment plant, but funding those plants and training a new generation to retain them. And those are all Trudeau's his promises, and that's what Carolyn Bennett had said. And so our operators shouldn't have to go through these things, and we shouldn't have to share salary. We shouldn't have to stretch out a budget and for clean water. And it's so entirely wrong that even on Six Nations that there's still people who go without clean water. They still they don't have the infrastructure and funding for people to get the piping to their house. They don't have the money to pay a person to come to the house every other week when they run out of water. And all of that, and a holding tank, and all of the infrastructure that comes with a house, and not just the house but the community, all of it all just needs more attention. And that's what the governor has said, and Trudeau has said that he would fix, and he has yet to do that. And so it's just looking at the bigger picture and what our rights are and how we should be treated as a nation, as a community. And it is racism at a point. I mean, it is totally racism, but like, because all of our communities, not all of them, but a majority of the communities across Canada have the issue of lack of access to clean water and infrastructure, not just clean water, that's like going for housing and all of these other issues that we just simply do not have the amount of money that we should have to hold our population have a healthy future. And so yeah, I just
Gosh,
want to point that out.
you really inspired a final question if we have time for it. Before we move on to the next video, talking about the water crisis in many Indigenous communities. I know you've talked with Dr. John Pomeroy from Global Water Futures. You've had him on Onegnos, and he talks about a Canada water crisis that's looming, the intersection of climate change and water problems that are being recognized kind of across the board in Canada, and crises in Indigenous communities have been ongoing for decades in many cases. I'm wondering from your perspective, what with the onset of climate change issues and this water crisis nationally and even globally, people are talking about a water crisis. What are some of your concerns for the future of water from an operator's perspective? Kind of a big question, but if anybody has any thoughts, I'd love to hear any of your opinions.
Yeah, I mean, for the future of water, I think, is just as Steve was mentioning earlier, is the dealing with the pharmaceuticals and all the other chemicals such as gas and fuels from logging industries or some sort of industry that works near water. They're polluting the water, not a lot, but enough. But having to try and keep up with the needs to try and filter that stuff out or treat it out in some way. I do recall seeing a news story a couple of weeks ago in regards to some university somewhere actually found a way to get rid of pharmaceuticals, a number of types of pharmaceuticals. It'd be nice if they can find a more convenient way to get rid of fuel spills and whatnot, like all those drilling rigs out there in the oceans that are leaking fuel or pumping fuel out there because their wellheads blew up or something, or a ship has leaked. But definitely we have to look at trying to figure out how can we clean up fuel spills and whatnot that's going to harm the environment and harm the drinking water for all the people. Excuse me. But it's definitely something that the future generation, I'm sure, will come up with eventually. From what I've seen and talked to people in the past, there seems to be a lot of students in multiple universities getting interest into drinking water, and who knows, there could be one of those diamonds in the rough out there that's going to solve a major problem.
Well, and I think that there's a lot more focus, and I think that the more people actually educate themselves around like climate change, because that's huge. Like, we're in the interior, we are semi-desert here, and we have essentially one source of water, which is our lake and our snow. But one of the things that we're finding is we're not getting as much snow as we once used to, and we're getting hotter, drier summers. But now our seasons are starting to shift and change, and due to climate change and crazy weather patterns, we're getting a lot more forest fires in BC. Those also have a huge impact on water quality. Just the fire itself, which is natural, but it creates so many water quality issues for us. And then it also creates additional storage issues, because stuff that would normally be absorbed by the soils is now just running straight into lakes. And so you're getting high floods and then major droughts all in the same year. So I think that we just need to be more cautious of what we do environmentally overall to try and help slow climate change in general. And also we have also become so used to, we have a term, I sit on the Okanagan Basin Water Board in my area, which is all of the irrigation districts. And one of the things that we have that we educate out through social media and through news releases is stop being a water hog, because people waste so much water and they don't realize it. And because we're fortunate enough to have, even though what we have seems limited, people still tend to waste it, like taking showers that are too long, running your sink while you're brushing your teeth, leaking toilets, like all of those things you don't really think about until you actually measure how much of that's just going down the drain too. So that also contributes to everything that we go through as operators. It's not only treating the water that you're using, it's treating the wastewater as well. And like, please, if I can do a PSA for your operators, please don't use flushable wipes in your toilet. They're horrible. I just want to help you out, Steve. I hope you guys don't have that problem, but we have that problem here. And it's like, please, it's not just because it fits down the toilet doesn't mean it should.
No, I agree with you there. But you know,
water.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just thinking, like, you know, you mentioned, you know, with the different things with pipelines and stuff like that. You know, that's something that's going on to this very day, right? We've got pipelines crossing all these different areas, and protests going on to try and, you know, there people are looking ahead already to say, you know, what happens down the road if you have a pipeline break under your water source. Like, there's something close to that, right? We've got gas pipelines and stuff that run under the Grand River now that, you know, some of them they're getting old. Like, you never know when something's going to come up like that, and how are you going to deal with it, right? Like, there's no, you can plan all you want, but if you got something that's that major, it's going to affect everybody. Looking at our system, you know, trying to put in things to take care of things that are up and coming down the line that aren't even regulated yet. You know, I think everybody's going to have to start looking, you know, further ahead into the future. And over the years, we haven't really had the people to look at that, you know. And even talking with climate change and stuff, we find here at Six Nations that it's not so much the volumes or the, you know, we get bigger floods now than we used to get, but like in the springtime when the ice cover comes off. But we're also finding the storms are a lot more severe when they come. So we get wind storms and, you know, snowstorms, whatever they.
Yeah, speaking as to climate change, is there any preparedness? This is a question from our audience. Do they get any access to climate change modeling and preparedness planning, or only municipalities? There will be water shortage of 100% in the next decade.
From the Six Nations standpoint, we've got basically our own plans in place of how we're going to deal with it. Well, what we find the most is with these bigger storms coming through is the damage it does to the equipment. Like, you don't think about it, but we had that windstorm earlier this year. Was pretty significant there, and we're still dealing with, you know, some equipment that's been damaged through that. A lot of the newer plants and stuff are, you know, you have a lot more electronics in there, so you get things that get damaged. They're not cheap. The problem is the government, you know, they look at the capital funding to give you a nice plant and give you everything, but then they don't give you the money to take care of it in the long run. So that becomes an issue. You start looking at, you know, these different areas, forest fires and stuff like that. A lot of people don't think about how that all ends up into the waterways. Like it impacts everything right down the line, right from the wildlife to the treating of the water to the people and the end users and wastewater even. So there's so many different aspects of climate change that you don't really look at, and that's, like you say, we get a couple of hydro outages a week sometimes here. We get spills and bypasses from upstream wastewater plants, sometimes 3-4 a week. It depends on, a lot of that depends on the weather, right? So, but hydro goes out here, nobody thinks anything of it, but there's the water's not coming out the tap. They know right away, right there on the phone.
Yeah. I think for such a long time. Oh, I'm sorry, Steve. Do you have something else?
No, I just kind of finishing up to say that it affects everything down the line. It's not just one little part of it. Like it affects everything, right?
Yeah, listening to you and Krista and Warren, it's just, I think for such a long time, the dominant water paradigm has been kind of that technology will be the solution. We'll continue creating new technology, and for me as an engineering student, that was kind of the bias that I always had. But I've just learned so much, especially Kosh, from all the different guests and on your show. It's that it'll require a behavioral change as well as technology development on like a global level to really change the relationship that people have with water and start respecting it. And particularly the Indigenous water ethic and the worldviews that from those teachings. I think that there's no coincidence that I think that the voices are getting louder, especially in the water industry. It's just hopefully that I always think of Day Zero in South Africa when they ran out of water, and then all of a sudden the water usage dropped by like 75% because people no longer had access to water. It was a crisis, and then behavior started changing. I think in this area there's so much water that there's almost been a complacency, and people, a lot of people have had the luxury to continue to abuse water, but I'm just worried about worry about the future, what that's going to look like. It's just so undervalued.
And you bring up a good point, Colin, about technology and emerging technologies. Technology is great, and finding new ways of doing things is, of course, the future. But unfortunately, sometimes we have technologies in First Nations communities that are far beyond what they need to be, and they actually create more problems than they solve. And so this is part of the problem for a lot of First Nations communities is we have our communities get funding. It's up to the community to make the decision, but there's nobody there with an education to actually help them. It's usually a third party. It's usually a consultant. The consultant makes money. The more money they spend, the more money they make. So the more difficult they create it so that then they can come back and continue to fix it. And I'm not saying every consultant is like that, but some of them do create problems knowing that it becomes a money source for them. And then they create these relationships with First Nations communities that are like, we're your friend, we're here to help you, just listen to us, we know better, like, let us help you. And they're creating these systems that are actually unhealthy for our communities. And then it doesn't matter if you have all the money in the world. Some of them are in the location where you can never get a part there to fix it, and then the system's wrecked anyways. So technology is great to a point, but being over technical is also hazardous as well. So I see that happening more and more. And the more communities that I talk to and the more First Nations operators I talk to, the more prevalent that becomes when they're overbuilding things. just because it costs more money, and then they've got to come in and fix it because it's not working. And that also puts a lot of strain on the operators. It's constant all the time, constant adjustments, trying to make something that should have never been installed work. So I do like I do like technology. I'm not anti-technology, but there's also a point where it needs to be the right kind of technology.
Like you said, it's creating almost like a dependency or an unhealthy relationship, and you've kind of seen that. It's one concept that I learned in school called neocolonialism. It's where countries create those dependent relationships with other countries to continue to kind of exploit them. And by the sounds of it, it's happening um, from these consultants and these water experts with some First Nations communities. It's terrible.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I never thought to think of that happening, and of that problem until you brought it up. And I think, yeah, we need to think about like what I think about that, because I think that it's gonna happen a lot more in the future as the technology continues to grow. Um, and yeah, it's kind of a scary thing to think about the future in all aspects, including that one. But I think that we'll end off that discussion unless anybody has any more questions or has any last words before we start our before I watch the digital story.
Uh, just a little bit to what Krista was saying about the universities and technology. I mean, the other benefit coming out of the universities and whatnot is the students. Like there's a whole bunch of new minds out there that are just full of different ideas that we older operators may never heard of and never thought about. Like for Lytton First Nation, we benefited with UBC and Réseau that came in and did a pilot project for one of our water systems and came up with a whole bunch of different treatment processes, and we got to pick and choose what would fit us the best. So having that part come in, which was great because it definitely, they were a lot cheaper to use than calling an engineering firm that'll charge us $700 a minute just to come up here and look at a creek and say, okay, yeah, we know what we're going to put in there. Here you go. Good luck making it work. But yeah, with universities like UBC and Réseau working together together with our leadership and our administration, some companies such as BIP or Home Plus, ISC, they all help in these projects. They definitely help us a lot. Lytton lately has become sort of like a pilot project area. So we've had a lot of people come in here offering to do different pilot projects. We're now working with a company called Aqua Intelligent. They're presently doing a pilot project on ways to help us with our remote monitoring of our farthest water systems via an app on our smartphones. There's a university in Calgary, Calgary University Water Movement. They're developing short videos on YouTube for water operators to view that may help with day-to-day operations within their own systems. So operators can go on YouTube now and say, well, let's see how do we do chlorination, or how do we do pre-treatment or whatever. They can watch a video now instead of reading a 20-page book on how to add chlorine to a pipe. Shortening things up a lot better. And again, the interest coming from the students out there that are just working on school projects that I've helped. I've had grade school students contact me from Vancouver that Googled my name and they started messaging me, asking me water questions and how does First Nations do this? How do they do that? It's pretty fun trying to talk down to a grade level understanding again. And then I go from grade level right up to university students calling and sending me questions that they want to ask, and they're inquiring as to how do we deal with certain things on First Nations reserves. One student I said, well, don't look at it as a First Nation reserve. My water issues are probably the same water issues that my community of the village of Lytton is having. So, we're pretty well the same. I'm not saying the village of Lytton and Lytton First Nation, we're two different entities. So my problem is no more different than the village of Lytton. I mean, we're all struggling to do the best we can with what we have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that we're all basically in the same boat one way or another, and we are all similar and struggling having the same struggles, even if we have a smaller population or a bigger population. And yeah, thank you guys so much for coming on our show and sharing sharing your thoughts and your struggles and how we can help you and what's needed on a community level, but also on a broader level, bigger level. Yeah, so thank you so much to each and every one of you for coming, and we truly appreciate it. And so does our audience. They really enjoyed everything that you had to say. And we had 16 comments in total, and we very interactive. So yeah, I'm so thankful, and we are so thankful to you as a show. Up next, we're going to have a digital story, and that is by one second. That's by a Cree story that is planet related. Let's take a look. Let's take a look.
When we talk about Wahkuhtun, it's that we're related. The Creator had created this universe and everything, and that universe relates to us, Wahkumga. We don't relate to it, they relate to us. And as we are on this earth, we are related to everything that's in the creation, the trees, everything, the grass, the rock, everything. It's part of the earth, just like we are. The earth provides for us. Today we call her Mother Earth. She provides everything for us. Ewan maya wako tona ta puyan me kaya me stahiki kai ta putame. Moi po ke me ko na me ka peono is mo temaga. Maga ka kio ki kai igis win gati igis wako tai kuya. Moi ki ano ka ki wako tena wio e pe wako tai kuya. E go maski. Moi te me to sak masko sia asini ka kio ki kai e wako tama.
Staigi waigi migu suni hio higuche pege manati ta humas kiuma. Ukawi mao pege tamago ya matsun.
Kwa mama ni yksi siis näissä knapahtin kaukako kui saktihin to treisin og isin hievaskam va sagi ton vittaski on vam. Kaksknoa poagevo skaissa ko mua kana nurn to mua nan tokis mai to tato wistois siis sknoa pakit mami va skais pai kaukako kuia ja kiwi tottame sagi ton tam taton vittaski on. Io yksin guys.
Welcome back, and thank you for watching our a Cree story. So now our next guest, her name is Lory Vanderzwet-Servos. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for helping me. Recently retired professor at Mohawk College who has been working on a Indigenous project for a few years now. Sego Lory, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Lory. Great to see you.
Hi, Colin. Hi, Makasa. Nice to see you both, and wonderful conversation with the operators there. My goodness, I'm not sure you actually need to hear from me after hearing from these guys, because there's so much information that these guys could share with everybody. They truly are really essential workers, right? I don't know where we'd be without these guys 24/7, 365. Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, it's crazy. And congratulations on your retirement. And can you tell us a bit about your career at Salt College and Mohawk and the courses that you taught?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so I've been teaching for just a little over 3 decades, and the first 10 years or so was in Northern Ontario at Sioux College, and the last 21 years here at Mohawk College. In Sioux College, I had the opportunity to really start focusing on environmental and water wastewater courses. We actually had on campus pilot water and wastewater treatment plant. So that was really great exposure. And taught, my background's actually chemical engineering, so I always threw a little bit of chemistry, et cetera, in there. When I moved to Hamilton and at Mohawk, I picked up an awful lot of the environmental courses as well. So along with water, wastewater, things like resource management, air pollution, health and safety. The college side, you have to be a jack of all trades, right? You have to know a little bit of everything. And then probably about 12 or 15 years ago, I was trying to remember when it actually happened, that the Ministry of the Environment approached a number of the colleges in Ontario. And knowing just what these guys were talking about earlier, that operators are hard to come by. And whether you're talking on reserve or in municipalities, and that especially post-Walkerton, what you want to have is, somebody that's is got a broad overview. They're not just focusing maybe on what's going on in the water plant. They've got a good grasp of the natural environment. These guys talked a little bit about a rainstorm and the impact a rainstorm is going to have on your raw water. So they were looking to start training operators that had a little bit more of a holistic approach, right? So knowing that they were going to run or have a shortage of operators and maybe kind of have operators come in with broader backgrounds, they approach the colleges, and there's about a dozen colleges across the province that now are able to offer what's called an operator in training. Sorry, I got that wrong. That's the entry-level drinking water course. We do talk to this, we do deal with the students in the operator in training, but we teach them is the entry-level drinking water course. So we've all spent some time at the Walkerton Clean Water Center. We're doing some trainer sessions, and it's one of the programs or courses I've been able to teach for the last dozen years or so, specifically focusing on water treatment and then water distribution as well.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I know that we already talked about the water treatment plant program, but do you want to tell our audience a little bit more about the water treatment or the water training program that we're developing at Six Nations?
Sure. So again, I mentioned 2 different certificates quite quickly in Ontario, as in the other provinces, right? Operators are certified and they go through certain levels of certification. The longer you're in the plant, the larger your plant is, you level up from initially individuals start with what's called an operator in training certificate. And then with time in the water wastewater treatment plant and writing exams, you can go to level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. So you need to, anybody that wants to work in a water wastewater treatment plant, they have to have what's called an operator in training certificate. to achieve that certificate in Ontario, you need a high school diploma, and then you need to write what's called an OIT or an operator in training exam. You don't need a formal education, though, just as what I was saying, the ministry would really like to have people that have, you know, some maths, maybe not so much chemistry, but environmental awareness. So, you know, but certainly a lot of operators, you know, you learn a lot just by working wherever, and you pick up a lot of knowledge along the way. So the minimum educational requirements are high school diploma, and you can, there's study guides available, and then you can write this OIT exam and get your OIT certificate. So the first project, there's two projects in that we've talked about with Don and members of the Six Nation. The first one then is to work through the high schools and to work with the educators in the high schools to help prepare the students to write this OIT exam. So it would bring awareness of water treatment operators to high school individuals. So it doesn't just have to come from your father or your uncle or your cousin. You now have some teachers within your high school sharing this potential for this career with you. And if we can, you know, make sure the proper maths are in place, a little bit of sciences that you need to know along with it. Then after the students have graduated, they can work through, and whether the coursework comes embedded in some of the high school courses or is an after high school kind of study session, they can write what would be their OIT exam. And so that's the first project. And then in Ontario and after Walkerton, what the ministry is required is that between this OIT and your level 1, an operator needs to go through a course called the entry level drinking water course. And again, write a series of exams. There's some practical work tied into it, and they would get a certificate called an entry level drinking water certificate. And they would need that before they can move up to their level 1. And so what we've have proposed in both the OIT and this entry level 1, so we've had projects discussed, proposals between both Six Nations as well as the Ministry of the Environment, and they have approval or approved the projects. So that entry-level drinking one would involve training. There's specific coursework that's required for this entry-level drinking water certificate, and for the college to be able to offer it, typically for the Mohawk College students in our environmental program, they take it in their 3rd semester of their course, of their program. So they have some math, some chemistry, some physics, some environmental science behind them. So with Six Nations, what the expectation then would be that this entry-level drinking water course would be part of a 4 or 5 course certificate program, right? So you go from, you don't just take this ELC course, you have to take a couple other little courses. One of them would be the self-study course, one would be a math course to help the students through the maths. But after a number of courses, 4 or 5 courses, then the students would get, and they are successful in their exams, they would then be able to get their entry-level drinking water certificate. So it really is that introduction to working as a water treatment operator. And it is something then that is obviously recognized both in municipalities as well as Six Nations side of things.
Yeah, and thank you so much for creating that and being a part of that and building that, because it's very needed, as our previous guests have said. Um, and yeah, I was thinking that maybe like I would be able to be a water treatment plant officer, but then you're like, oh, you need to know your maths, and I'm like, I don't know my maths very well. I am so bad at math; it's insane.
I'm sure Makasa, with the right training, you'd be good. It'd be good. It is really important, right? Because if you are adding chlorine to disinfect, you want to make sure you're adding the right amount of chlorine. Even though a lot of it happens automatically, you still need to make sure you have to have to run some analysis, but you also want to make sure that you're dosing at appropriate rates. Yeah.
Yeah, I would totally get in trouble. But yeah, I
different ways,
totally
Kosh, to support water, right? You know, you're
yeah,
already doing so much with the show
Exactly.
and your activism, and you know, everybody's got their calling for sure.
yeah, and math is not my calling. I think the last time I did like math was in grade 10.
Yeah.
And that was a long time ago. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that well, like Colin, if you had another.
I was just gonna ask Lory a little bit more about one aspect of the training program, but unless you had a question tied to her explanation of just the certificates in the high schools and stuff, was there anything else you wanted to add to that, or were you gonna move on as well to
Um
another question?
no, I was just going to say that like our audience, that this is available to you, what she's explaining. Are going to be
Okay.
available, or is it available right now, or will it be available in the
Oh,
future?
sorry, the question. So you know what, okay, so there's been approvals by the Ministry of the Environment, which we thought was, would be a challenge, but they're pretty good, because even through Walkerton Clean Water Center, this ELC course, this entry level course, there are they are helping First Nation individuals to access that course without payment. But it is that challenge. I mean, Walkerton is probably 2 or 3 hours from Six Nations, right? So it is kind of that distance side of things. So what the ministry is definitely approved. Six Nations are all in, colleges in. We are looking as much for some funding to make sure we can formally, it's not just about training or using the material that's sitting there exactly as the ministry has it. For the operator and training course, it would have to be something that could tie in a little better to high school curriculum. And then even for the entry level course, there are the costs that would go with the delivery of the course, right? So they aren't available yet, but it is something that actively my former dean now is looking for funding for. So that's where the stage is at, is trying to get the monies to get the programs running.
Yeah, setting it up with the schools too, of course, take time, and COVID, like the effect that COVID's had on everything has been somewhat of a setback. I'm sure, right, in terms of getting it off the ground.
Yeah, definitely. It really does put a stop, and a lot of the meetings would have been, face to face, just kind of where are we at, how are you moving forward, and everybody's really kind of shifting gears and trying to deal more with working their way through the pandemic as much as anything. But it is certainly, there is some federal monies that, some federal fundings that's tied to sustainability. And that's the last that our dean was looking at, trying to access some of the federal funding that's available. And he was feeling that it was quite promising.
I just listening to the explanation and trying to tie it into the rest of our discussion tonight, it's really amazing, because like you said, it's offering similar type of training that would be at the Walkerton Center, local in Six Nations, but it's also looking to target students that are, I think, a little bit younger to introduce that type of opportunity or that type of career in water. Um, there's also an opportunity to indigenize the program a little bit. So adding Indigenous knowledge and perspectives, which is my understanding as being will be a component of it as well, right?
Definitely. So, you know, the thought, not so much with the operator in training, but the second level, the entry level, because it needs to be part of a package of programs that the ministry wants to see. And that, again, just ensures then that those future operators have some other background materials, right? Whether it's some environmental science or some chemistry, some math. But if we speak especially to the environmental science aspect, that would be certainly an area where you would have a Indigenous knowledge perspective versus a Western science perspective, teaching that environmental science side of things, right? And so you could easily have in a certificate that is 4 or 5 courses, you could easily have 1 or 2 that is very Indigenous focused. And then the thought would also be, if you have those 4 or 5 courses, then a college diploma is 20 courses. And those 4 or 5 courses would also be the stepping stone and directly transferable to those 20 courses that make up a environmental technician diploma. So somebody could, you know, eventually then work their way to, from this certificate to a 2-year diploma. And that is most what our operators from the college, they have a 2-year diploma before they go out and work full-time as an operator. So it's a great stepping stone in a number of ways.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, you mentioned.
Oh, sorry, Kash.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna ask another question again, so feel free to respond to what Lory was just talking about, if you have something.
Oh, no, yeah, no, you can.
Okay. I was gonna say, I was just thinking about the other part of the program too, because when Warren was talking about the YouTube videos that are being developed by some students, I think it was out of Calgary. Is that right? As like a, you know, a type of training opportunity, or like a resource that is open access that can be used as a reference. It reminded me a little bit about the virtual reality piece of the Oneganos project and this work that you've been involved in. Would you be able to speak a little bit to the virtual reality and the ideas behind that, and what sort of is the vision for that for the future?
Sure. So Mohawk College has partnered with Eon. I don't know if it's Eon Technologies, we'll say Eon Technologies. And we have a virtual reality center. And there are 2 projects that are moving. Well, the one for sure is the college is moving forward with Six Nations, and that is the one where we're looking at exploring the history of the Grand River and the historical aspects of the Grand Rivers before settlers came in, and what it would have looked like, you know, 400, 500 years ago, from you know, the tales that have been passed on. So it's the virtual reality of the Grand River. And then on the more technical side, what we hope to do, and one of my colleagues is actually putting in a proposal to our associate dean, is to look at having the water treatment plant at Six Nations put into VR, so that operators could train through VR. So you can see virtually if you have rainfall effect, what is it, how's it going to impact your water treatment plant, and you can see what adjustments you need to make in your chemical additions, whether that's your alum or your chlorine or whichever. So there's kind of two projects that are lined up on the VR side. One's a historical perspective, and one would be for training purposes. I'm assuming those are the two you were talking about, Colin, or was it one of those two?
Yeah, that's right. Particularly the operator training
Yeah.
VR. So I mean, it's pretty amazing because with something like that, with a technology like that, that could also be scaled up to other further remote communities too. So some of the challenges,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah. You know, I've never actually donned on a pair of those glasses, but I understand from anybody that has that it is really mind blowing, right? And the things you can see and do in the VR side of things. Yeah, so that would really be, you know, if we could bring something like that to Six Nations, that would certainly help make Six Nations a good center for training for, you know, Southern Ontario, Southwestern Ontario. Yeah, and so I know there are other Indigenous training centers across even Ontario, but the one main one is Kenora, right? So that is a 2.5 day trip to get to Kenora. So really it is really time to get something in Six Nations area would be the ideal area, whether it's a face-to-face training or through the VR side of things.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, yeah, definitely a lot of people can benefit from the virtual reality. Like that is a whole new era into talking about training and technology. And there's a lot of things like that are super cool and are up and coming. And just to sit back and like, I just think that like it's just really groundbreaking, really, into a new way of learning, especially a water treatment plant or learning Indigenous ways of knowing and connections to water. And the whole thing is just mind blowing and really great. And I think, and we really need this. And so you talked about how you are in Walkerton. How does Walkerton E. coli crisis of 2000 compare to the water crisis that exists in so many communities across Canada?
You know, I think, as I was saying before, I think in Ontario, when you're talking about training for water, you have to acknowledge Walkerton because for all the things that went wrong, right? I mean, between a poor selection for a well, between chlorinators not working, operators not really knowing what they're doing and falsifying records and management of falsifying records. Though I think the one thing with Walkerton that is very different than what you have for a water crisis across in Indigenous communities. So Walkerton was one well, right? So the problem was one well, and they were only using that one well to soften the water. They had a number of other wells that they could get potable water from, but this one well easily got contaminated. The weekend it all happened, there was a rainfall event of 6 or 7 inches of water, so the whole wellhead was flooded with water that was laden with cow manure and E. coli. So it was almost there certainly was a lot of work that had to take place, and that would be largely through the Walkerton Inquiry and Justice Dennis O'Connor and his study of the Walkerton incident. That took a couple years to come out. The actual incident was almost acute versus chronic, right? Because it all happened over a weekend. And when the water lines were flushed, hyperchlorinated, they could clean out the system. And I don't think there's any or any communities, Six Nations or other reserves that have that luxury where it's a one-time flush and we're good to go. We can, you know, it's clean. And the challenge being, especially on Six Nations, where you've got wells that have been contaminated by groundwater with some heavy metals and some organics, and those are, you don't have alternative sources, right? So other than, I mean, because of how the regulations came about and how water is now regulated very strongly across the province, even though it's suggested that you follow the same regulations on reservations, it's not mandated. So, you know, there should be similar guidelines that are followed, but nobody's forcing you to do it, and the government also isn't making sure it happens. And so there are certainly some similarities in the outcomes, but the challenges on reserve are definitely much greater. First of all, because of the type of contaminants that are there and not a lot of easy alternatives. And then because you're not dealing within the structure of the provincial government, right, to work through the water challenges. I do, you know, the good story of Walkerton is in the end, for Walkerton itself, they cleared the water and they now have this beautiful training center. Through it all, you know, there was 7 deaths, 2,400 people seriously ill, many people still ill. You like to think that out of some of this bad, you can find some good. And, you know, you really hope that through some of the training you're looking to develop here, maybe some VR, that you can, it will be a much longer time span, but there could be some real positives that you can see over time for sure.
Yeah, Steam, Krista, Warren, do you have any questions or comments for Lory?
Well, listening to your talk about the education for operators, the OIT and the 2-year university program, very similar to what I had taken in TRU back in 2006 to 2010. It was a 4-year program, but they were working with operators that, like myself, that had to work and do schooling at the same time. So we would go to school for 1 week every 2 months or so, and then carry on. And we go back to our jobs and work and do our homework, and then go back to school for another week, and same thing, back to work and having to do your homework during that time. But they found a way to intermingle the homework with our daily duties too, which is great. So, you know, creating our own slow sand filter, so we have a good understanding how a slow sand filter works.
Oh, wow.
So using coffee filters and dirty water, we just dragged from a puddle just to see how much we can filter out. I mean, yeah, it's very similar to that, what you were talking about with your area.
And so you were able to do that, Warren, where they would actually pay you while you went to school?
Yes.
Yeah, that's yeah, hugely helpful. Yeah, I mean, what you don't want to have is just kind of one very focused, one course kind of thing, right? You want to have that broad perspective. Yeah. Yes. And was that available to anyone that was working for the for your community?
Yes, mainly for the employed operators. So you had to be working with the First community at the time. And then, like say, it was a 4-year program. We ended up with a diploma at the end also in water treatment technology program, I believe is what it was called.
Yeah, you guys became certified water quality technologists.
Well, that's a really good, yeah. I mean, the water quality technologist option is really a great, along with the treatment, right, and the operator and distribution side, the water quality, treatment.
And that was something that was actually created through the BC region of ISK. So it was actually an operator training program that was funded by the government for operators in BC First Nations. And so that it's still continuing. The cohort that was supposed to start this September got canceled because of COVID. So there's another thing that's happened with COVID, but it will continue, and it does get funded through ISK. So there may be a potential to reach out to, if you guys are looking for funding, you could potentially reach out to the operator training coordinator at the BC region, and they may be able to help you guys come up with a funding program that would potentially get approved in Ontario. Like I don't know how your region works for ISK, but it was a partnership between ISK and the university directly. So there is potential for that. And there's I guess proven partnership in BC.
Right. Yeah.
And it's been very successful. Like there's been a lot of operators that have gone through that and have become very successful for their communities. So.
We're the pilot program.
Yeah. Yeah. Were you in the first cohort, Warren? Or the second? The first one, yeah.
The first ones.
I mean, it's a lot to take on. It's like you've all said earlier that you need to be committed to being the operator and knowing what it takes to become all you can be, right? And so, yeah, kudos to you. That's really amazing. That's one of the biggest challenges, to be able to go to school while you're working full time. It's certainly not easy for anybody. Yeah. I think, just conversations and letting people know that there are these wonderful careers, and you have to be that right person, right? But to be able to work within your community and provide, like the most important thing, right? You're as important as that doctor or nurse by providing clean drinking water to your neighbor. Right? How much better can it be? And your family, of course. Yeah.
Well, and the good thing about being a certified operator is you can be that person for anybody's community as well. Like
absolutely.
I know that we've done like operator trades, right? Where we've brought in somebody that didn't have enough experience from another community. They came and worked with us for a week or two to get to understand this kind of system that we have. We've sent an operator to kind of replace them while they were away in our community learning. So, because one of the hardest parts of, I know at least in BC, it may be the same for you guys, is a lot of communities only have like one or two operators. So to actually get away to train, there isn't anybody left behind to actually run the system. So education is great, which I think your virtual learning is a great idea, because it may give an opportunity to learn on site rather than having to go somewhere. But until everybody has that ability, having operator exchange programs has been really successful in BC, because that community is not left with nobody, right? And that operator finally gets a chance to go and learn somewhere. And so we've been able to do that with a couple of operators. Our system has now gotten a little bit too big, because they come here and then they're like, this is like, our smallest pump is 10 times the size of their largest pump. So we've been linking other communities together with each other that have kind of same systems that are open to that as well. So education is huge.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, Krista, because the virtual reality is such an amazing idea. Just to echo what we were talking about earlier with the Global Water Futures of Neganos virtual reality project, providing access to some level of training through virtual reality on site without having community members have to leave. My understanding that's kind of one phase, because I think there's only a limit to what you can learn from virtual reality without actually having to be in the plant. So the goal would also be to have the Center for Training at Six Nations to be kind of a Walkerton equivalent in Six Nations, and other innovative approaches like the exchange, the operator exchange is there's such a I guess there's really a suite of options or opportunities that need to be available in order to make I guess continue to train or offer opportunities for becoming an operator to more people. So it's really exciting, I think. Just what you mentioning that the virtual reality opportunity would be something that's compelling, but also those other approaches that have been working for your community.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I just wanted to say that because I've heard a couple of times now about the things that you guys are doing for your community, and just having these sessions, like, this is something that isn't happening everywhere, but it's amazing. Like, the first time I saw a clip of this specific show was through a presentation that I saw Dawn do, and I just thought, what an amazing opportunity to educate your guys' community members, and what a way to be able to showcase what it is that you do and the concerns, and just to get like open and honest feedback, and to make it something that's accessible to everybody. And then you guys are just continuing to grow from that. So I just wanted to say that I'm very excited to participate, because I think that this is an amazing thing that you guys are doing for your community.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we honestly wouldn't be able to do it without all of our help, like Colin, Hannah, Catherine. But mainly, it's just me and Catherine and Hannah most of the time, and we're all basically the same age, running this whole show. So it really is amazing that we can work together and provide this for our community. Not just our community, but for other learning purposes, for other communities, for schools and for classes. And I'm very proud of my team and working on this like every single week, and getting all of you guys lined up together, and and making it look smooth and easy.
The hardest part.
Yeah, that's the hardest part, as you've seen behind the scenes. Yeah.
Gosh, it really is such a great way, especially during the COVID times, to keep the important discussion going, to be able, to share the amazing work going on in Six Nations, a Global Water Futures of Neganos project, and you being able to recruit such an amazing group of guests every week, just like today. So again, thank you so much for having me on today. I know I'm usually a little bit more behind the scenes, and I know Catherine and Hannah are doing more of the behind the scenes work than me, for sure. But I'm just really honored to be able to share the last couple of hours with Steve, Krista, Warren, and Lory, and you. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, no problem. I enjoy my job. I like doing this. So I would like to say thank you to our guests who are here, to Lory, Krista, Warren, and Steve. Thank you so much for all of your, especially all your time, but also your knowledge that you shared, and sharing it with our audience, and being here with us. And this will forever be on the internet, basically, on our YouTube channel. If anybody needs to wants to save it and go see it later, it will always be there, and any kind of communities can learn from you, and anybody can learn from what you have shared with us forever. So Nyawe, for being on our show, and we all appreciate all of the work that you do. And yeah, you should definitely be recognized a lot more for what you do on a daily basis. And your pay should be like up here. Yeah. Hopefully that happens
Well, thank
someday.
you for the input.
Yeah, and I hope we can continue communicating as well too, because I think having discussions like these, but also that kind of solidarity across between the Global Water Futures Indigenous project and operator training. There's just such a growing network. I think that's being built. It feels unstoppable, doesn't it, Makasa?
Yeah,
like
it really
change
does.
It's coming.
Yeah, from all of the people that we talk to every single week, like everybody and every single person is doing something great and doing something for our community and the health and well-being for our people, and not just like Haudenosaunee people, but all people, especially when it comes to water, whether it's an activist or water treatment plant operator. We're all doing it for basically the same reasons. For the health and well-being of the people, and protecting the water, and working with the water. So it's really a special thing, and the show doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. So I just like to say that. Some dust off my shoulder. We did a really good job in doing that. Well, thank you anyways, and if anybody had any last words for our audience, please say it now, or forever hold your peace, or however that goes.
I just want to say thanks for having me.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for having me on the show. I got a reason to go to BC and check out a few new places now, I think.
Anytime.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, same. If you're ever in BC, I'll give you a full tour.
Yeah. Same. You're welcome at Six Nations anytime you're out this way. It's been interesting to hear that, so far away, yet it's all relevant. You hear the same stories no matter where you go, and everybody's fighting the same battles out there. So, and that's what we'll continue to do. So thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, no problem. And thank you to our audience for staying with us, and we appreciate all of your comments and your views and your time, and we appreciate all of our guests' time as a show. And I think that is how we're going to end it off, and we're going to watch a music video to end it. Is that correct, Catherine?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Kat, before you put it on, Makasa, I have to give the toodaloo after you, so I've been waiting to do that. So let me know when we're saying bye to the audience, so I can join in with your toodaloo if that's okay.
Okay, that's after.
Is that after? Okay, we're coming back on. Okay.
Is a music video playing?
I will put it on right now.
Okay, enjoy it. welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for watching all of the 2.5 hours of this episode. And we're so grateful for you. And I want to say another thank you to our guests for joining us and all of the stories and the knowledge that they shared. And we know that this is so needed. And they need the recognition. And I also want to say, have a happy retirement, Lory. Yeah, that I can't imagine. I mean, I wish I was retired right now. I haven't even started like a real job yet. And it's just it's crazy to think about retirement, but I'm so happy for you. And I think my mom wants to retire soon, but she has so much work to do that I don't think she's going to anytime soon, sadly. Sorry, Mom. Yeah. So anyways, thank you everybody for coming, and thank you to Colin, my co-host today, who did such a good job. At him and his friend the Beard did a very good job at appearing on the show. And thank you, Hannah and Catherine, for another amazing show. And I can't wait for next weekend. Also, that's gonna be about food sovereignty and security. So that's gonna be a good one. And Kitty Liquors and Adrian Liquors, I believe, and also Tanya Brandt are going to be joining us, and they're going to be talking about food security and food sovereignty. So don't miss the episode. That's next week on Thursday at 7 p.m. Same place, same channel, same everything on Facebook Live. So yeah, I'm so happy.
Thank you, Makasa, again so much. And I will, if you'd have me back anytime in the future, I'd love to co-host with you. It was so much fun. You made my Thursday night for sure. This made my Thursday night. So thank you. Thank you again.
No problem. Ona, toodaloo.
Toodaloo.
Hi, everybody.
See ya.